When you finally walk away from someone who has been feeding off your love, your energy, your attention, something in the air shifts. You might not notice it right away, because you are too busy surviving the silence, trying to remember how to breathe without checking their moods, their texts, their approval. But make no mistake, when you go no contact with a narcissist, you set in motion a storm they cannot escape. Their world begins to unravel, slowly at first, then violently, and though they will never admit it, they suffer. They suffer in ways they cannot put into words, in ways that betray their carefully built masks. Tonight, I want to take you into that dark descent, stage by stage, because it helps to know what happens on the other side of your decision. Not to gloat, not to take revenge, but to see the truth. Your silence speaks louder than anything you could have ever said. Think about it. They thrived on the rhythm of your attention. Every message, every apology, every time you came back, it was oxygen for them. And when that oxygen is cut off, they suffocate. They may look composed, posting photos, smiling, pretending they are untouchable. But behind closed doors, a very different reality plays out. The narcissist who once seemed so powerful now stares at their own emptiness, forced to face the one thing they've spent their entire life running from: themselves. This isn't just about them. This is about you too. Because understanding what they go through after you cut the cord can be healing in its own way. It validates the pain you endured, the chaos you lived through, the confusion that left you doubting your own sanity. And as you hear these words, I want you to let yourself feel something different. A quiet strength, the kind of strength that whispers, you were not wrong for walking away. And if you're here listening right now, maybe part of you is still searching for answers. Maybe you left, but you still feel haunted by memories, by the what-ifs, by the guilt they planted deep inside you. Or maybe you're on the edge, wondering if cutting contact is too extreme, too harsh. If that's where you are, let me tell you this. No contact is not cruelty. It is survival. It is the boldest declaration of self-love a wounded heart can make. So stay with me, because we're going to walk together through the 5 dark stages a narcissist suffers after you go no contact. We're going to see their unraveling, not to celebrate their pain, but to free you from the illusion that they never feel it. They do. And once you see it clearly, you may find it a little easier to let go of the guilt, the longing, the invisible chains that tied you to them. If you've been carrying these wounds quietly, if you've been trying to heal in silence, know this: you're not alone here. Thousands of others are walking the same path, listening with the same ache in their chest. So if these words touch something inside you, take a moment to breathe, to pause. And when you're ready, remember to subscribe so that this space continues to grow. A place where your story matters, where your healing matters. Your support is not just for me, it's for everyone who comes here searching for light after surviving the darkest kind of love. The first stage begins the moment your silence becomes real. For the narcissist, it feels like a sudden collapse, like the ground they were walking on has been stolen. They expect you to break. They expect the familiar cycle, the silent treatment, followed by your anxious texts, your apologies, your desperate attempts to fix what was never yours to fix. But when nothing comes, no message, no call, no sign of you reaching back, that silence cuts them deeper than any argument ever could. At first, they're stunned, confused. Their ego tells them this can't be happening. You've always been the one to bend, to chase, to carry the weight of the relationship. So they sit there, waiting, convinced that at any moment your name will appear on their phone screen. But the longer it doesn't, the louder their fear grows. And fear is something they cannot stand, because it makes them feel powerless. This is where their mind begins to twist. They tell themselves stories to soothe the wound. They say you must be playing games, trying to manipulate them. They say you'll never last without them, that you're weaker than you think. They replay the highlight reel of all the times you came back before, using those memories to reassure themselves that this time will be no different. But in the pit of their stomach, they know something feels different. The silence doesn't just last a few hours. It stretches into days, then weeks, and slowly, the panic begins to sink in. You see, for a narcissist, control is everything. It's how they breathe, how they define themselves. And when you go no contact, you steal back the one thing they relied on: your reaction. They can't push your buttons anymore. They can't twist your words. They can't feed on your tears. And that emptiness, that loss of control, is unbearable. It's not just rejection, it's exposure, because without you, they are left with the truth of who they are. But here's the part that matters to you. The silence you hold is not weakness. It is power. It is you finally choosing to stop pouring into someone who only ever took. And while they rage in the shadows, trying to figure out how to pull you back in, You are learning what it feels like to breathe freely again. So if you've been doubting yourself, if the guilt has been heavy, I want you to hear this clearly. Your absence is not cruelty. It is clarity. You are not punishing them, you are protecting yourself. And the very fact that they cannot stand your silence should tell you everything you need to know about the prison you were once living in. This first stage is only the beginning of their unraveling. As their confusion turns into anger, as their panic hardens into obsession, the descent grows darker. But remember this, what they suffer through is not your burden anymore. You've carried enough. When the confusion fades, the second stage begins anger. And it is not the kind of anger that simply passes like a storm. It is the kind of anger that simmers, that coils in the pit of their stomach, because your silence tells them a truth they cannot bear. They are no longer in control of you. The narcissist depends on a constant stream of validation, attention, and energy to keep their fragile self-image intact. When that supply is cut off, the mask begins to slip. Anger rises not because they loved you, but because they feel entitled to you. In their mind, you do not get to walk away. You do not get to decide the terms. You do not get to take back the power they claimed as theirs. And so the fury takes over. You may not see it directly, but behind closed doors they pace the room, replaying every conversation you ever had, twisting the memory of your relationship into a weapon against you. They may lash out through subtle messages, posting things online designed to provoke you, or sending cryptic texts to see if they can still reach you. If you ignore them, the anger only grows darker. Because to a narcissist, your refusal to react feels like the deepest insult. This anger is rooted in humiliation. They feel abandoned, rejected, discarded, the very things they once made you feel. But instead of facing that pain, they project it outward. They imagine ways to punish you. They tell themselves you are ungrateful, disloyal, weak. They convince themselves that you never really mattered to them, even though their entire being is now consumed with thoughts of you. And here's the paradox. The more they rage, the more they reveal their dependence on you. Because real power doesn't scream, it doesn't chase, it doesn't scramble to prove itself. But when you stay no contact, their rage exposes the truth that all along, it was your energy, your compassion, your willingness to forgive that kept their world from crumbling. For you, this stage can feel haunting. You might sense the anger even from a distance. Maybe you see the posts, hear from mutual friends, or feel the heat of their resentment like smoke drifting through the cracks. It can stir up old fear in you, the fear of their disapproval, the fear of their punishment. But let me say this with all the softness it deserves. Their anger is no longer your responsibility. You are not here to manage their storms. You are not here to absorb their fire. Your silence is what protects you. It is the shield that keeps their rage from dragging you back into the cycle. And while they burn with fury, you are quietly reclaiming something they never wanted you to find: peace. This second stage is messy, volatile, unpredictable. But beneath the fury, something else is waiting, an emptiness they cannot escape. Because anger, no matter how loud, always gives way to something quieter. And for a narcissist, that silence is unbearable. And then comes the third stage, the collapse into emptiness. After the rage burns itself out, after they've tried every trick, every provocation, every desperate attempt to get a reaction from you, there is nothing left but silence. And that silence, the very silence that frees you, becomes the thing that torments them the most. You see, anger at least gives them fuel. It keeps them moving, keeps them convinced that they still matter, that you are still locked in the same old dance. But when no response comes, when your silence stretches on like a horizon they cannot reach, the fire goes out. And what remains is something they've spent their entire lives avoiding: the black hole inside themselves. This emptiness is unbearable for them, because deep down, under all the masks and manipulations, the narcissist carries a wound they've never healed. A wound from childhood, from never being enough, from never being seen, from needing to perform just to survive. They have spent their whole existence running from that void, covering it with attention, control, validation. But when you walk away and refuse to return, that wound is exposed again, and this time, there is no one to patch it up. In this stage, they may look lifeless behind their smiles. They may surround themselves with people, distractions, even new partners, but nothing sticks. Because what they're missing is not just you, it's the reflection of themselves they once saw in you. Without your eyes, your care, your willingness to forgive, they are confronted with their own hollowness. You might be tempted to imagine them moving on easily, as if your absence barely touched them. But the truth is, your silence leaves them stranded with the very pain they've built their life around avoiding. They may try to numb it with work, with parties, with fleeting affection. But the emptiness lingers. It follows them into every room, every late-night hour when the mask slips and they are alone with themselves. For you, this is the stage where guilt often creeps in. You may wonder if they're okay, if they're breaking down, if your silence has wounded them too much. Because that's who you are, you care, even when they never cared for you the same way. But I want you to hear this. Their emptiness is not yours to heal. You tried for so long. You gave and gave until you were empty yourself, and nothing you gave ever filled them, because nothing could. The weight of their emptiness belongs to them, and the greatest act of love you can give yourself now is to stop carrying what was never yours, because as they crumble under the silence, you are learning to rise in it. You are learning that peace is not found in fixing them, but in finally being free from the impossible task of saving someone who never wanted to be saved. This stage is where they are at their weakest, where their carefully crafted image begins to crack. But the story doesn't end in emptiness, because from that void comes something even darker, the desperate attempt to claw their way back into your life, no matter the cost. The fourth stage arrives like a shadow with sharp claws: obsession. Once the narcissist has stared too long into the emptiness, once they realize you are not returning, the hunger inside them becomes unbearable. It is no longer just anger or fear. It is an obsession that consumes their thoughts. This is when they begin to circle you again, not with love, not with regret, but with desperation. They cannot tolerate the idea of losing control over you completely. They cannot stand the truth that you exist outside of their grasp, breathing freely, living without them. And so, they begin to plot. You might notice their attempts to resurface. A sudden message, a call from a number you don't recognize, a post online clearly aimed at you. They may reach out through mutual friends, through family, through any crack in the wall you've built to protect yourself. Sometimes it's sweet words, apologies, declarations, promises of change. Sometimes it's darker accusations, guilt trips, or veiled threats. But the motive is always the same: to get back inside your mind. And if they cannot reach you directly, they may obsess in silence, checking your social media, asking about you behind your back, watching your life from the shadows. Because to them, your silence is not just absence, it is rejection. And rejection is the one wound they cannot endure. What makes this stage so dangerous is the intensity of it. The obsession drives them to extremes. They may swing wildly between begging for your return and trying to destroy your peace. They may attempt to rewrite the story, painting themselves as the victim and you as the cruel one, all in an effort to lure you back or at least stain your strength with doubt. And this is where your resolve is tested most. Because when someone who once had so much power over you comes knocking, it stirs something inside. You remember the love you once felt, the hope you once carried, the part of you that longed for things to be different. They will try to press on those soft spots, those tender scars, convincing you that maybe this time will be different. But pause here, breathe. Remember what it cost you every time you went back. Remember the sleepless nights, the confusion, the shrinking of yourself just to keep the peace. That was not love. That was survival dressed as love. And obsession is not love either. It is hunger. A hunger that will consume you again if you let it. For the narcissist, this obsession is their last attempt to reclaim the control they once had. But for you, it is the moment to stand firm in your silence, to remind yourself why you walked away. Because as much as they chase you, the truth is, the more they chase, the more they reveal how powerless they really are. This stage is not the end of their descent. There is one more, the darkest stage of all, the final collapse, when obsession can no longer hold them together, and they are left with nothing but the truth they've always tried to escape. And finally, the fifth stage, the collapse into despair. This is the point where every mask has cracked, every strategy has failed, and every illusion of control has slipped through their fingers. They have raged, they have chased, they have obsessed, but nothing has brought you back. And for the narcissist, that reality feels like death. It is not the kind of despair you or I would know: the grief of loss, the ache of missing someone we truly loved. For them, it is the despair of losing supply, of losing the mirror that reflected back the image they needed to survive. Without you, they are forced to face what they've always run from: the emptiness, the loneliness, the truth that they cannot fill themselves with someone else's soul. This stage is quiet, but not peaceful. It is heavy. They may sink into depression, their energy drained, their confidence shattered. Outwardly, they might still pretend, posting smiles, surrounding themselves with distractions, but underneath, the despair grows. Because the truth gnaws at them: you are gone, and they have no power to change that. Some will try to numb it with new people, but even that fails. Because no one ever replaces the one who left with silence. No one ever replaces the person who broke the cycle. And so, they spiral deeper. For the narcissist, This despair is not just about losing you, it is about being forced to confront the hollowness of their own existence. But here is the most important part. This stage belongs to them, not to you. You are not responsible for their despair. You are not responsible for their inability to face themselves. You did not cause the wound, they carried it long before you ever loved them. You only revealed it by refusing to play the part they needed. And for you, this is the beginning of freedom. Because their collapse is not your collapse. Their despair is not your despair. You are learning to live outside of their shadow, to find strength in your own silence, to feel joy without needing to make yourself small for someone else's comfort. This final stage is the one they cannot escape, but it is also the one you no longer have to carry. They may sink, but you rise. They may collapse, but you begin again. And that is the quiet power of walking away. The story does not end in their suffering. It begins in your healing. If these words have touched something in you, if you felt seen or understood in the ache of your own journey, I invite you to stay connected here. Subscribe, share this space with someone who needs it, and let this community remind you that you are not alone in your healing. Every step you take away from what broke you is a step closer to the life you deserve. And though it may not feel like it now, one day, the silence that once felt heavy will sound like freedom.